We don't win down here. We lose. You ready for that? Oh, you were a post-millennialist. You thought we were just going to go waltzing into the kingdom as you took over the world.
Welcome to Nobody with a Bible. I'm Chief Nobody Brandon. And here we talk about all the things and use biblical discernment while doing so. So let's dig in, not using your feelings, but God's truth.
What's wrong with you people? I'm serious. I mean, this is what's wrong with the Christian church today. We don't know who God is, and we don't know who we are.
All right, today's question I'm really excited about because it is one that you have never, ever done a podcast on. And we've done a ton of podcasts. So there's been a lot, but this is a cool question from a listener, one that although we discuss a lot in our home and with one another in our family, it's not one you've spoken about here or taught on. So the question being,
I have personal interest in this.
You do, you really do. Should a confessing believer seek scientific knowledge, for example, putting people in a state of sleep or being frozen some way, that lets them travel far distances in space? What about seeking life on other planets and just seeking anything having to do with outer space that's not from a biblical/creation teacher?
See, I love this question.
You do love this question. You love space. You love all of that. It definitely makes me think, though, of that whole, Wall-E style. We have, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. I mean, so much now is happening with this whole space travel thing and colonizing outer space. I feel like we're literally, we've about completely trashed this Earth, and so we're going to load up on our little Wall-E ships and, head out is, what everybody's essentially trying to do. But It's crazy how... I mean, Wall-E isn't that old. It's been a while since that movie came out. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
No,
Disney
probably,
with the
I
cute
think it's been 10 years?
Maybe, yeah, 10 years or so. So I guess it's been a decade.
It's been a while.
Whatever. You can tell how much we pay attention. But I feel like when that came out, that still kind of seemed kind of Jetson-ish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was so far out in the future. But now you look around and you're like, oh, wow. We're getting really close to people thinking that's what we're going to go do, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think for a believer, and this is, like I said, this is a great question, but I think for a believer there's two different ways to look at it. That is one of them. I think it's interesting for us to note, we see that the world and their pursuits and everything that they're going after, they're saying, okay, Earth is not going to be able to sustain us for much longer, so we have got to figure out how to colonize other planets and make this a source of being able to live and send people to and all these different things. So, which is that's crazy. Obviously, if you're a believer, that's far away from anything that we're worried about. But that's the kind of the worldly way to look at it. But the biblical way to look at it, and I know some people have some really, really strong opinions on this issue, and I think that they're interesting for us to have conversations about. I think that we need to have these we absolutely do need to have these conversations because these things are becoming realities. Now, one thing that people on the other side will try to come against this idea of space travel and all this stuff is they'll try to bring Psalm 115:16 in and try to make that apply to the situation. And that reads, "The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man." So they'll say, see, earth is men's, or is been given dominion by God to man, and the heavens are the Lord's, and we just don't touch those. And that's a complete incorrect application. I mean, that we can't add that. That's not what that verse says there. It's more so just it's acknowledging his sovereignty. But I think the interesting side of this is, again, the Bible does not specifically address yes or no as to whether a Christian should or should do this, or what motivation they would have behind it or anything like that. What it does indicate, though, is that God created the heavens and the earth. So these are his heaven. Everything that is knowable that you see is created by God. And we see this over and over and over again, we have specific examples like, Psalm 8:3, for instance. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, the psalmist acknowledges the moon and the stars which the Lord has set in place, so they're part of his creation. Psalms 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. We also have Isaiah 43:7 that reads, everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. And then we have Isaiah 48:13, my hand laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand, which is interesting, my right hand spread out the heavens. When I call to them, they stand forth together. So I personally think it's all, for a believer, it's all about who you're giving glory to and the reasoning behind it. If we are, as Christians, getting involved in this stuff and pursuing science, because this is one of those things that is fascinating. I mean, what more could you be doing to, glorify God's creation and glorify God than working to try to understand it as a believer? If you're, if you're able to help in this way, because this is one thing that Christians toss aside way too much, is science. And while I agree with every Christian argument against science and evolution and all, the Big Bang, all this stuff, we shouldn't be so quick to just toss science out the window, because science shows us the operation of how God is working. God is allowing us to understand to our human extent, the operation of his creation, which is, we should thank him and praise him for that. This is understanding that comes from God, not from man. So God is definitely giving us the ability to that. And I think that there's, the more exploring that we do in different planets and travel and this different things, this is how big we realize how much bigger God is. And so that's where I think in this pursuit, as if you're a believer, and yeah, absolutely, I think that you should and you can be pursuing these things. The human sleep thing, freezing, this kind of stuff. I understand the arguments against that stuff. It's kind of weird, but at the same time, to be able to move forward, some of these things would have to, inevitably become possible to do. And if it came to that point, that would just be God allowing us to be able to figure out how to freeze a human to send them, trillions of miles into space, or I shouldn't say trillions, but you know what I mean. Because that's not something that can come from man. That would be giving man too much credit. So I think we've certainly got a lot of work to do on this earth, and we know for 100% fact on the other side of it that humans are unique. We are absolutely unique, and that's what you have to understand, is that could there be life on other planets? Theoretically, yes, but biblically speaking, no, because the Bible is all about man and God. But it's all about God, of course, but it's a relationship between those two, and how God reconciles himself to man through Christ. And that's what that's what the whole thing is about. So we are unique and created in the image of God, and God has breathed life into us, which is another unique thing about humans versus animals and anything else. Is yes, the God formed animals out of the dirt, but he did not breathe that life into them as he breathed into the human. It does not have the same the same effect. So all that being said, I mean, as long as we understand that we're not searching these things, looking for something, or trying to, appease something, trying to escape something, as long as we are scientifically pursuing these things to just show the glory of God, absolutely. And I think, even if humans eventually, even if they did colonize Mars, God, you could give God glory on Mars just as easy as you could anywhere else. You could certainly, if this is going to become a reality, I would really hope that there would be believers running. And one of the, things about this is the law. What sort of sets of laws and rules would we have on Mars? Well, I don't know, but a believer better getting involved with it. It's something that I think that it should be. Again, this is all doing this for the glory of God, though, and just to show others the glory of His creation and the reality of God, and just how, and the sovereignty of God. That's what I would give the 100% green light to on this issue. On the other side of it, if we're a believer looking for aliens and other world, just these, how we're going about it, it's, where your heart is with it, just like any other issue, I think, would be my answer. And I think that it's absolutely a gift from the Lord to be able to have the technology that we have even had. I mean, we can, you can pull it up now and you can look up. I mean, it's not a live feed, but you can see images, taken directly from the surface of Mars that are clear as crystal now. I mean, these things aren't, grainy. And, when we see these things and we know the size of our knowledge is limited, but we know the size of the universe just shows the greatness of God and just the sovereignty of God, and how He is somehow, and we can't comprehend it even outside of this. So, my answer to that might be a little bit different than a lot of other people's. I think that we need to be careful of it. I don't like some of it, just because of the worldly pursuits, but hey, the believers, I'm all for it.
On the day of judgment, do not fear for the atheist so much, the thief, the murderer. If you want to be afraid for someone on the day of judgment, be afraid for those who carried the title pastor. Let me give you an example. I gave this example last night. Let's say that a king had a bride. He loved her. He dressed her in white. She was pure and precious to him, and the people admired her for her virtue, for her merit. And the king has to go on a long journey, and so he tells his steward, he calls his steward in and he says, here are the directions, and you are to care for my bride. You do not deviate from this, not one jot or tittle, and when I come back you'll be rewarded, or I'll come back and you will be severely punished. Keep this book, these instructions with regard to her. Well, after a few years, this steward realizes that the people are losing their loyalty in the king, and they're no longer concerned about the bride because, well, she's just prudish. She's old-fashioned. So he takes her and takes off her beautiful white garment and replaces it with something really sensual, paints her face like a prostitute, and then marches her up and down the kingdom and uses this new look to attract carnal men back into the kingdom. When that king comes back, there are no words to describe what he will do to that steward. And when Jesus Christ comes back, there are no words to describe what he will do to many of these men who call themselves pastors, who have done to his bride exactly what the steward did in that parable.